this is Joseph, aka JJ Colborn, and I am here to announce my top 10 favorite releases of 2023. I figured what better way to present these top 10 fragrances than to recite my own reviews that I had written for them throughout the year. So I'm going to get things started with the first one, and that is Darren Allen Perfumes, Dorian's Fougere. This one is gorgeous. Absolutely impressed with this perfumer. This is an indie perfumer. And this is a Fougere that truly matches the classical approach of the genre and then some. Dorian's Fougere is a culmination of my favorite aromatic elements. Naturally, it opens with an effulgent lavender and bergamot, but also includes a beautiful mastic leaf, coniferous and almost incense-like. It feels like a pastel, cool celadon green, a foliage patina, a tender melancholy. Darren Allen used his own artisanal extraction of hay, which reveals itself no sooner than the top note fanfare crescendos, revealing one of the most satisfying new mown hay accords I have encountered, rivaling that of Santa Maria Novella's Fieno, Oriza Legrand's beauties, and vintages I've sampled from the early 20th century. This is combined with three notes that I adore: carnation, geranium, and hawthorn. I am in heaven. This is my sweet spot. It elicits a frisson. My whole body shivers. Darren managed to combine all of this with aplomb. The end result is an equipoise that feels soft and plush, like the trichomes on the leaves of forest foliage. Darren anchors it all with vintage musk and civet, and when combined with this tonka, my skin feels ensconced, swaddled by the woodland, listening to the haunting song of the hermit thrush. It's a balm for the weary, a sonnet for the soul, and it proves to be one of the most impressive indie releases that I've experienced this year. And that is Dorian's Fougere. Number 2 in the top 10. Quartana, Forest of the Golden Dream Eau de Parfum. I recently received a comment on a video I made for YouTube for liturgical fragrances begging the question, why the hell would a human want to smell like an Orthodox church? Why? Who knows? I sure do want to smell like an Orthodox church now and then. Why do I want to smell like a working class man circa 1966? Why do I want to smell like a brothel at 3 a.m.? And why do I want to smell like I've crushed conifer needles and rubbed them all over me in a fit of ecstasy? And that brings me to the Forest of the Golden Dream. For the sake of transparency, I've befriended Joseph Quartana since he agreed to be a guest on one of my Effluvium live streams recently. And when I expressed my admiration for Forest of the Golden Dream through a sample that was provided to me by my good friend Rachel, he offered to send me a bottle as a gift. So there you have it. YouTubers and social media influencers of all kinds. This is how simple transparency can be. So do take note. So this was a gifted bottle. That aside, yes, there's this rapturous evergreen milling on the skin under a forest with a filtered sunlight beaming rays and melting the snow. As our eyes travel downward, we see that the understory is filled with shadowy mystery, with club moss poking out of the white, icy carpet, witch's butter glowing yellow-orange like an art from a rotting log filled with hibernating insects. Perfumer Celine Barel employs some brilliant trickery here. Following the crown, so note this is it's divided here, much like our chakras. The top is a crown, heart is the heart notes, mid notes, and then root for the base. So the crown when it starts to settle a bit, with this bright lemon and piquant spice, it follows in the heart the use of this ingredient, this material called Pomplazest, produced by IFF and in my own collection of materials. This has a fresh citrus zest to it, but also it's camphoraceous, it's sap green and earthy. What's ingenious is that it serves to lift the coniferous needle effect to give a true impression of the resins that exude from the foliage that are that just using distilled oils alone cannot replicate. There's this eucalyptus as well that accompanies the heart to further enhance this effect. The usage of Mimosa Absolute as well imparts a soft yet granular pollen-like texture. Molybdenum, frankincense oil, ties it all together. It's spectacular. So as we reach for the base, or the root as it were, a lingering, warmer, mossier aura remains, as if night has fallen and I've retreated to a cabin to retire. It feels softer and buttery, with the evergreens still clinging lightly, a meditative balsam fir and patchouli being most evident. Forest of the Golden Dream has a transportive effect that would be well suited for those who daydream about the mythical and the primeval, who give in to the raw and elementary, speaking to one's inner forest satyr or nymph. It's some lovely stuff. Third on the list, from New York-based indie perfumer Mark Sage, Clandestine Laboratories. This is a release from this year that is called Wendover. So as I had originally wrote this review, it was an unusually cold, raw, gray day in early May, and Wendover had fit the mood perfectly. There's this immediate impression of this tarry smoke that's layered over this pronounced hawthorn accord, which is anisic, bittersweet, and frothy. What soon follows is the surfacing of peaty soil, the sensation of moist air and a chill, a mist, with some spring flowers just managing to cut through. Growing more plangent green in its progression, Wendover elicits a chill, a tingle, hitting nostalgia and wistfulness in me in a powerful manner. I feel echoes of sensations that are now just out of reach, now vague and inevitably fading. The musty past for which I refuse to loosen my grip. It smells like a cellar for storing feelings that are hard to articulate. I look out my window and fixate at the rain as it starts to stir up a puddle. A castoreum forward leather pulls me forward like aged, calloused, yet loving hands. The embers cool, the ash drifts, and a flicker of sweetness remains. Wendover is experiential, that's for sure, but it's also eminently wearable, and it is reminiscent of the beautifully coarse aromatics marketed to men in the late 70s and early 80s, like Leonard Peraume, Dunhill Blend 30, and Eben de Balmain. But Mark Sage hasn't merely given us a smokier facsimile of the aforementioned. On the contrary, like water percolating through soil, it pulls heartstrings for me, because Sage was daring enough, to include thoroughly disparate elements to impart a mood, and that's the mark of ingenuity. Wonderful. Fourth on the list, Descendre. Descendre from Les Abstraits. So as a matter of transparency, once again, I am a friend of Eugene, and he proffered me a bottle of Descendre, and I just couldn't refuse. As I love Antoine Lee's work and was impressed with his compositions for the first release from Les Abstraits, La Douleur Exquise, and also Belle Âme. I also love what he has done with Eris Parfums and Les Indémodables. And I'm truly appreciative and humbled, and in no way was otherwise compensated, as I am by no means a product influencer, and I do not do endorsements, paid or otherwise. It was actually a risky undertaking for my friend Eugene to give this to me, because it could have very well have gone in a different direction, and maybe I wouldn't have connected with it. Um, and regardless, I probably would have been honest about that. So it just so happens that I did connect very well to Dissandra. I am in agreement with the comparisons that I've read online to Estee Lauder Alliage, Aramis Devon, these two outdoorsy galbanum bitter pine 70s gems from Bernard Chant's laudable canon. And to a lesser extent, some aspects of Polo Green, which also falls into that vicinity. However, I would be remiss without bringing into relief Antoine Lee's meditation on these elements through Dissandre. There are these raw materials in Dissandre with an aromatic depth, and it would be tedious to tease apart exactly what materials were used. But I can say from my experience that we have some very fine naturals here, and Lee pushes them in spaces that lend a dimensionality to the composition. The galbanum is not merely a shrill, biting green wall. It has a luminous sheet, this curtain drawn to set the stage. The saturated floral quality that follows is more of an abstraction, but a lovely one nonetheless. And the violet leaf lends a grassy, somewhat quenching cucumber facet as well. However, it is the usage of Heraceium here that is most noteworthy. The way it exalts all the other elements. The raw materials feral, pungent, and urinous. But much like the magic of civet or castoreum, it modifies and enhances, as long as it's not overdosed. It highlights the leather and the smoldering pine resins, breathing life and movement into them. This is a pièce de résistance of Dissandre, the magic of animating scent through an alchemical ingredient, lending a fleshy vitality through the skilled hand of a perfumer. Excellent release, and my regards to Eugene and to Antoine Lee for such an excellent line. Next in tow is from Laboratorio Olfattivo, and this is called Till. So I was a bit reluctant about a modern interpretation of a linden blossom that features cashmeran. Oh no, cashmeran can go different ways. But Till shows some genius on the part of Luca Maffei in choosing a material that dissolves the seams between the linden and the musky dry down. The earthy, woody, animalic undertones of linden are exalted by the coniferous, plush, woody musk of cashmeran. The linden here is exquisitely rendered and lifted by profile-adjacent jasmine and neroli. There's a cooling effervescence from ginger that adds a quenching quality to it. The result is a tranquil exhalation with the occasional wafting punctuation of neroli. Its pairing with the linden imparting the ultimate fresh laundry while working in nature sort of effect. It is inviting and gentle, but by no means a withdrawn wallflower of a fragrance. Its radiance just never nags, as I often find with the modern niche fragrance approach. There's integrity and just the right amount of intrigue, much like in Maffei's brilliant Cologne Intense for Houbigant. It is deep and simple rather than shallow and complicated, which I will admit comes from the words of Mr. Fred Rogers, the late great Fred Rogers. I recently finished reading The Good Neighbor, the life of and work of Fred Rogers, and I'm not sure if Mr. Rogers wore any fragrances at all. He wasn't much for vanity at all, but if he did, Till would probably suit him. It is neither necessarily overtly masculine nor feminine. It is benevolent, hopeful, and tender. And also, as I was writing this review, A Summer Wasting from Belle and Sebastian just finished playing, and that song suits this fragrance as well. And that's where my ramble for this beatific new release ends. So that is in the top 10 for 2023, Laboratorio Olfattivo Till. Next is from Robert Piguet. This is Zazen. Zazen means sitting meditation. Done in quiet, often in a lotus position, either through following one's breath or repeating a koan or mantra. This perfumed Zazen had me skeptical before I experienced it. I try to temper my cynicism with an open mind, but I'm leery of the co-opting of these traditions for Western consumption. Before I thought to roll my eyes, I felt a pang, though. Maybe this will feel earnest and I can respond in kind. And I sampled it, and it felt good. Zazen opens with an immediate apple peel tartness and a citric pucker as if representing a Tibetan bell. What follows is the aroma of saffron-scented steamed rice. This is the first time I've encountered a beautiful, realistic rice accord in a perfume. A hum of cool green runs through like an enso. It feels like wet, tropical vegetation, watercolor violet leaf, cool bamboo, hints of teakwood. I'm even reminded of the scent of milkweed sap. There's this lactonic green, but different from that of fig. It's beautifully peculiar and calming. Slowly, Zazen shifts into a translucent musk, and hints of what remind me of dried mandarin peel, sweet and slightly out of focus. I've actually worn this while meditating, and it fits. It does not distract. And my regards to the perfumer for an artful and respectful ode to this concept. Then we have Apothéose from Oriza and Legrand. I love the immediate effervescence of Apothéose, from its aldehydes, black pepper, and the light camphor of eucalyptus. I welcome this penetration of my senses as it lashes me until it transforms into a rosy caress and light nibbles from ylang-ylang. It's voluminous. This mother of pearl musk that's at the core here. I'm reminded of Nivea cream, the slightest eager perspiration wearing a freshly laundered shirt starched with Niagara, and the cotton that's used to keep pills in a bottle fresh. Mind you, all of this is positive in my book. The gauzy musks may prove to be vertiginous to the more fragile of noses, but for those like myself who will gladly smother themselves in their large globular molecules until left in a stupor, this is just heaven. If you can survive through sparkle, Neely Sparkle, I have faith in you. Get ready to float in the powder-dusted magic bubble up to cloud nine. If fragrance is like Chanel 1957, White Linen, Creed Royal Mayfair, or Les Indémodables Mousse de Sable make your heart skip a beat, it would behoove you to get acquainted with this rousing Apothéose. And the ninth one in the top 10, Feuillle from Miskeo Parfums. The breeze shifting the wildflowers and weeds in this expanse of land on the sanctuary that I frequent. It stirs the scent of heated phloem leaves and stems, flowers ranging from the size of a pin head to the, like a to my hand, like totally lost my track. Ranging from the size of a pinhead to that of my hand, all swaying, all seducing flying creatures into their coronas. Linden trees along the perimeter produce their pollen and their sensuous nectar, adding to the bouquet in the atmosphere. Chamomile and fleabane, yarrow and mugwort, they too are the chorus for this theater of abundance. Feuillle is intensely vegetal, weedy, and stemmy, and I adore it. This is the culmination of all I ever hoped and wished for in a fragrance that honors wildflowers, weeds, and rogue vegetation. The crispness softens just somewhat for a time, opening up to the distant wafts of acacia and what reminds me of honey locust. What's notable is Marie-Pierre Blanchette's use of core racine. This perfume material, for which I'm familiar with and quite fond, it evokes a deep green, the essence of moist plant fibers from within the cortex, the flavor of nasturtium in aromatic form, pea pods, green bell peppers, snap stems. Furthermore, a juicy violet leaf accord moves forward as well, watery green, cooling and calm. This connects me to the wonder of my childhood that I still carry with me today, as evidenced in a lot of my photography, honing into the details of nature, the tiny flora and fauna, bees, hoverflies, shy beetles. They become my friends, if only for a few moments, before I move on to a new rock or flower or tree. And I lied. That was the 8th one. This is the 9th one. This is Else from Francesca Dell'Oro. Else Parfum. So while this was inspired by the protagonist Elsa of Arthur Schnitzler's 1924 novella Fräulein Else, I would prefer to set that aside for now to be left with a clean slate on which to draw my own inspiration. To me, Else is a love letter from perfumer Marin to the legendary Mousse de Saxe, Saxon moss base. Produced by Fabrique de l'Air and originally intended as a marketing tool to highlight 6-isobutyl quinoline, formed the basis of many classical mythical compositions composed by Ernest Daltroff, such as Nuit de Noël and Tabac Blanc, and it heavily inspired the works of another favorite perfumer of mine, Guy Robert. Mousse de Saxe forms the core of Else, stirring and shape-shifting, a kaleidoscope of bitter green, liquor sweet, tobacco smoky, and rose geranium tart. It's fleshed out from this core by a dry mandarin peel, warm cinnamon, and antique carnation, with impressions of dried prune and apricot. Else dries down to a patina of a long-lost past, resurrected and made anew, in a way that unfortunately the houses of Caron and Guerlain have not quite managed to preserve in the modern interpretations of their classics. I've been cut to the quick so many times by the feeble whispers of these legends, and Else is a remedy in its authenticity. It is so respectful to the classical time in perfumery, but serves not merely as a facsimile. It has its own stories to tell, and they are spellbinding. It feels like traveling with ghosts from the past, exploring the dark corners of the darkest secrets of the long lost and the long gone. The dust of old postcards from one sweetheart to another, both just echoes in the vastness of eternal energy. That dust may contain the detritus of their lives that were lived, skin cells that have morphed back into stardust, waiting for one day when they will be swept back into the cosmos, even if that day is a billion years from now. Old boxes containing dreams lived to completion or never lived at all. I cannot tell, since a whole century has passed and the world has regenerated itself many times over. But love still lives, bittersweet and haunting. It still lives on somewhere else. And lastly, the 10th one is released by Roberto Greco, and it is called Rock. The shuffling of elements, shimmering, oily, and alive. Rock is the ultimate dépassement for my weary mind. I've long been drawn to the unconventional beauty of the undergrowth and the unlikely spiritual vitality that can be drawn from the almost alien organisms that communicate through profoundly complex networks for which we've only begun to scratch the surface in understanding. Rock is the fantasy of being welcomed into their world. Much like Roberto Greco's arresting photography for which this is paired, Rock feels amorphous, varied in focus, and surreal, while giving the impression of both childlike wonder and simmering carnality. I am reminded of the nearly overripened berries I'd pick with my mother along the cranberry bogs as a child here in New England, the sticky sweetness, and the occasional insect friend to be plucked off and sent on its way. I think of the examinations of mushrooms that spring out of nowhere after it rains and breathing in the aroma of the pine straw carpet, tawny in color. The undercurrent has an emergent feral texture, horse stables and distant pastures, the most well-loved worn leather. Christopher Sheldrake employs amberome, a distillate of labdanum produced by cinnarome that highlights the olfactory qualities in the ethyl esters of labdanum. It's warm, animalic, peppery, and tarry, with a leather and ambergris-like core. It's a stunning material and used to great effect here. I am transfixed by Roque in its oblique angles and dusty, textured atmosphere. It arrests me as droning music would. Listen to harmonias sometimes in autumn, as it would make a great pairing to this. The urgency of work and structure just falls out, and I'm left feeling like a sensory organism. Breathing, heart beating, perspiring, still as a turtle on a fallen limb, bathing in the sunlight. It feels alive, and I feel alive. So those are my top 10 for 2023. If you enjoyed this video, please don't hesitate to like, subscribe, hit the bell button to receive future notifications. And I wish everyone a fruitful and abundant, a healthy, and a splendid new year in 2024. Take care.